Before we start, tell me where you're listening from in the comments. Maybe you're someone who's reached a stage in life where dating feels more exhausting than exciting. Maybe you're wondering if it's possible to be happy without constantly searching for the one. Maybe you're curious about what it means to choose solitude over the endless cycle of hope and disappointment that dating has become. This conversation is for you. At 54, I've made a decision that surprises many people. I don't date anymore. Not because I've given up on love, not because I'm bitter about past relationships, but because I've learned something about myself and about modern dating that has fundamentally changed how I approach the possibility of partnership. Today I want to share why I've stepped away from dating, what I've learned about myself in the process, and why this decision has brought me more peace than years of trying to find the right person ever did. This isn't about becoming a hermit or closing myself off from human connection. It's about recognizing that the way most people approach dating today is fundamentally broken, and that there might be a better way to live, one that doesn't involve constantly evaluating every interaction through the lens of romantic potential. Let me start with what dating looks like when you're in my position. Every conversation becomes a negotiation about privacy, publicity, and genuine interest versus opportunism. Every person you meet has already formed opinions about you based on news articles, social media posts, and public speculation about your personal life. When I would meet someone new, I could never be sure if they were interested in me as a person or in the idea of being associated with my success. Were they genuinely curious about my thoughts and feelings, or were they collecting stories they could later share with friends? Were they looking for a relationship, or were they looking for an experience they could add to their personal narrative? This uncertainty poisoned every interaction. I found myself constantly analyzing people's motivations, looking for signs that they had ulterior motives, second-guessing every compliment, and questioning every expression of interest. That's not dating, that's paranoia with romantic packaging. But the problems went deeper than just the complications of being a public figure. I realized that I'd been approaching dating with fundamentally unrealistic expectations, not about what I wanted from a partner, but about what dating itself could provide. I had been treating dating like a solution to problems in my life that dating couldn't solve. I was looking for someone to cure loneliness that came from deeper sources than just not having a romantic partner. I was seeking validation through other people's interest in me, instead of building genuine self-worth. I was hoping that finding the right person would somehow make me feel complete, whole, satisfied with my life in ways that had nothing to do with romance. After 3 marriages and countless shorter relationships, I finally understood that I was using dating as a way to avoid dealing with myself. Instead of learning to be comfortable with solitude, I was constantly seeking the distraction of new connections. Instead of developing my own sources of meaning and fulfillment, I was hoping someone else would provide those things for me. The turning point came about 2 years ago, during what I now recognize as my last serious attempt at dating. I had met someone who seemed genuinely interested in me as a person, who wasn't impressed by wealth or fame, who had her own successful career, and didn't need anything from me except companionship. We dated for several months, and on paper, everything should have worked. She was intelligent, kind, attractive, independent. We had good conversations, shared some interests, enjoyed each other's company. But I found myself constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, looking for evidence that she would eventually want more time, more attention, more emotional availability than I was capable of providing. I realized that I was approaching the relationship like a business negotiation, constantly calculating whether what I was giving was sustainable long-term, whether what she was asking for was within my capacity to deliver. I was treating love like a resource allocation problem, instead of experiencing it as a natural expression of caring about someone. One evening, she asked me a simple question: "What do you want from this relationship?" And I realized I didn't have a good answer. I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want drama. I didn't want someone who would try to change my work habits. I didn't want someone who would create complications in my life with my children or my companies. But what did I actually want? What was I hoping to gain from spending time with her, from building a connection, from potentially committing to a future together? I couldn't articulate it because I had never really thought about it. I had been dating out of habit, out of social expectation, out of the vague sense that successful people are supposed to have romantic relationships. And that's when I realized that I had been dating for the wrong reasons for decades. I wasn't looking for a specific person who would enhance my life in specific ways. I was looking for a generic solution to the generic problem of being alone. But I wasn't actually alone. I have meaningful relationships with my children, close friendships with people I trust and respect, professional relationships with brilliant colleagues who challenge and inspire me. I have a sense of purpose through my work, sources of joy through my interests and hobbies, and a spiritual life that gives me peace and perspective. The only thing I was missing was the specific type of connection that comes from romantic partnership. And while that's a beautiful thing when it happens naturally, it's not something you can manufacture through the modern dating process. So I made a decision that felt radical at the time, but now feels like the most natural thing in the world. I stopped dating. Not temporarily, not until I heal or figure things out, but permanently. I decided to build a life that was complete without romantic partnership, and to trust that if the right person came along organically, I would recognize that opportunity without having to actively seek it. I stopped having to maintain dating profiles, stopped having to navigate the awkwardness of first dates, stopped having to explain my schedule and my priorities and my limitations to people who were essentially strangers trying to decide if they wanted to build a life with me. But the deeper effect was something I didn't expect. I started enjoying my own company more. When you're not constantly evaluating every social interaction as a potential romantic opportunity, you can be more present for the interactions themselves. When you're not always looking for someone to complete you, you can focus on becoming complete yourself. I started taking myself on dates, going to restaurants I wanted to try, attending events I was curious about, traveling to places I wanted to see. I discovered that I actually enjoyed doing these things alone, that I didn't need someone else's company to validate the experience or make it feel worthwhile. I began to understand the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is feeling disconnected from others, even when you're surrounded by people. Solitude is feeling connected to yourself, even when you're alone. I had been conflating the two, thinking that the solution to occasional loneliness was constant companionship. But loneliness, I learned, isn't caused by the absence of other people. It's caused by the absence of meaningful connection to yourself, to your purpose, to something larger than your immediate needs and desires. You can be lonely in a relationship if that relationship doesn't provide genuine understanding and intimacy. You can be content alone if you have a strong sense of who you are and what matters to you. This shift in perspective changed everything about how I relate to other people. When I'm not looking for romantic partners, I can appreciate people for who they are rather than evaluating them for who they might become in my life. I can have deeper friendships because I'm not holding back emotional energy for a hypothetical romantic relationship. I've also become a better father. When you're not dividing your emotional attention between your children and a romantic partner, you can be more present for your kids. You can model for them what it looks like to be a complete person who doesn't need external validation to feel worthy and fulfilled. My children have never known me to be in a stable, long-term relationship. They've seen me go through divorces. They've watched me struggle with the aftermath of failed relationships. They've experienced the disruption that comes when someone new enters and then leaves their father's life. By choosing not to date, I'm showing them that it's possible to be happy and fulfilled without constantly seeking romantic validation. I'm modeling for them that your worth doesn't depend on someone else's assessment of your desirability. I'm teaching them that it's better to be alone and authentic than partnered and compromising essential aspects of who you are. This doesn't mean I've become antisocial or closed off from human connection. I still have close friendships. I still enjoy spending time with people. I still value intimacy and emotional connection. But I've learned to find these things in non-romantic relationships, which actually makes them more sustainable and less complicated. I've also learned to distinguish between wanting a relationship and needing one. Wanting something means you would enjoy it if it happened, but you're fine without it. Needing something means you feel incomplete without it, which creates desperation and poor decision-making. For most of my adult life, I thought I needed romantic relationships to be happy. This created a cycle where I would rush into relationships too quickly, compromise too much of myself to make them work, and then feel devastated when they inevitably failed because they were built on need rather than genuine compatibility. Now, I understand that I want companionship, but I don't need it. This is liberating because it means that if I ever do meet someone who genuinely enhances my life, I can approach that connection from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. I can offer them my best self instead of my needy self. I've learned that the best relationships happen when two complete people choose to share their lives, not when two incomplete people try to complete each other. By becoming complete myself, I've prepared myself for the possibility of real partnership, even though I'm not actively seeking it. There's also a practical element to this decision that I think is important to acknowledge. Dating takes enormous amounts of time and energy. The process of meeting people, getting to know them, building trust, navigating the early stages of intimacy, all of this requires resources that I would rather invest in my children, my work, my personal growth, and my existing relationships. At 54, I have maybe 20 good years left where I have the energy and health to pursue ambitious goals. I have rockets to build, cars to perfect, problems to solve that could benefit humanity for generations. I have children to raise, friendships to nurture, and personal interests to explore. When I calculate the time and energy cost of dating against the potential benefits, the math doesn't work out. The likelihood of finding someone who truly enhances my life, who doesn't create new complications or conflicts, who shares my values and goals and approach to life, that likelihood is small enough that the expected value of dating is negative. This might sound coldly rational, but it's actually emotionally liberating. When you stop feeling obligated to seek romantic partnership, you can invest your emotional energy in relationships and activities that consistently provide meaning and joy. I've also realized that my previous relationships failed not because I chose the wrong people, but because I was trying to force romantic connection to serve functions it wasn't designed for. I was asking romantic partners to be my primary source of emotional support, my main social connection, my motivation for personal growth, and my solution to existential emptiness. That's an impossible burden to place on another person. No one can be everything to someone else. No relationship can solve all of life's problems or fulfill all of humans' needs. By stepping away from dating, I've been forced to develop multiple sources of fulfillment instead of depending on one person to provide everything. I've strengthened my friendships, deepened my relationship with my children, found new sources of meaning in my work, and developed a more robust spiritual life. This diversification of emotional investment has made me more resilient and less dependent on any single relationship for my well-being. It's also made me more interesting and more capable of genuine intimacy because I'm not approaching every interaction from a place of neediness. I want to be clear about something. This decision isn't permanent in the sense that I've taken some kind of vow never to be in a relationship again. It's permanent in the sense that I've stopped actively seeking romantic partnership and I've built a life that doesn't require it. If I met someone tomorrow who genuinely enhanced my life, who shared my values and goals, who could integrate into my existing commitments without creating conflict or requiring me to compromise essential aspects of who I am, I would be open to that connection. But I'm not looking for that person. I'm not creating space in my life for that person. I'm not making decisions based on the possibility of that person appearing. I'm living as if I will be single for the rest of my life, and I'm making sure that's a life I'm excited to live. This approach has brought me more peace than years of dating ever did. Instead of constantly evaluating my life against the standard of whether I have a romantic partner, I can focus on whether I'm living according to my values, whether I'm growing as a person, whether I'm contributing something meaningful to the world. I wake up each morning knowing exactly what my priorities are and how I want to spend my time. I don't have to negotiate with anyone about my schedule, my goals, or my approach to life. I don't have to worry about disappointing a partner or failing to meet someone else's expectations of what our relationship should be. This doesn't mean I'm selfish or that I've given up on love. It means I've learned to love myself enough to build a life that works for me, regardless of my relationship status. It means I've stopped treating romantic partnership as the ultimate measure of success or fulfillment. If you're someone who's exhausted by dating, who feels like the process has become more about performance than genuine connection, who's tired of constantly evaluating every interaction through the lens of romantic potential, I want you to know that there's another way. You can choose to step away from dating and focus on building a life that's fulfilling on its own terms. You can invest your energy in friendships, family, personal growth, creative pursuits, and meaningful work. You can learn to enjoy your own company and find contentment in solitude. This doesn't mean giving up on love. It means trusting that love, when it's right, will find you naturally. It means refusing to settle for relationships that require you to compromise essential aspects of who you are. It means building a life so rich and fulfilling that partnership becomes a bonus rather than a necessity. At 54, I've learned that the most attractive thing about a person isn't their availability or their eagerness to be in a relationship. It's their completeness, their self-sufficiency, their ability to be genuinely happy whether they're alone or with someone. I don't date anymore because I've learned to date myself. I've learned to be the kind of company I want to keep, to create the kind of life I want to live, to become the kind of person I would want to spend time with. And that, I've discovered, is the best preparation for love, not the desperate search for it, but the peaceful readiness to recognize it if it appears. Share this with someone who might be struggling with the pressure to find a partner. Subscribe if these conversations help you think differently about relationships and self-worth. And remember, your value doesn't depend on someone else's assessment of your desirability. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is learn to be happy on your own. What would your life look like if you stopped looking for someone to complete it and started completing it yourself?